Between Hawaii and California, in an area about twice
the size of Texas,
is the
Great Pacific Garbage Patch.
For
For
decades,
decades, tons of our
plastic
plastic debris has
accumulated
accumulated
there
because of swirling ocean currents.
It looks like
It looked like a cloudy soup, and that's because the plastic objects are spaced far apart and they range inside a large debris in the sky. There are raised for
There are at least 4 other
other
garbage patches like this in the world.
garbage patches like this in the world, and
And
after scientists discovered them starting in the 90s,
they thought that this might be where a lot
they
of the
thought that
plastic
this
ended
might
up.
be where a lot of
Out
plastic
there,
end up out
floating
there
on the
floating on the
surface.
surface. But
But
recently, scientists brought large nets to
the Great Pacific
the
Garbage
patch
Patch
and took
and took a closer
a
look
closer
at
look
objects
to the
that
object they pulled
they
out.
found water
They found
bottles
water bottles
and
and hard hats
and bottle
and
caps
bottle caps
and
and
toothbrushes
toothbrushes
and toilet seats
and
and
laundry
baskets.
baskets.
And using
And using what they
they were
found,
able to
they were
calculate
to calculate how their risk was in all of the garbage patches. There were about a few 100,000 tons of plastic at the surface of the ocean. It's a huge number.
big number.
It's a big number, but a few 100,000 metric tons of plastic is only about 1% of the
8 million
8 million tons of plastic scientists believe.
Every year. A mystery. Where does
the rest of the
ocean's plastic go?
Plastic go.
This is
clue number one in the case of the mystery plastic, a seafloor sediment.
It was
taken from the bottom of the Santa Barbara Basin of the coast of California. It represents a measure of time from 1870 at its deepest layer of sediment up until
But this
period from 1945 to is where the study also was focused on.
It's the
area of plastic production. In this layer, the study author found plastic fiber and fragments that were 1 millimeter or smaller than size. They found more and more plastic particles as the year went on, doubling every 15 years. That rate is nearly identical to the rate of global plastic production. As soon as you see a layer of microplastic, you pass 1950s and that's the legends of our generation. This is Laurent Lebrun. He worked at the Ocean Cleanup and led the study in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. It will be there forever. We know that.
The sea
sediment study looked at the microplastic particles smaller than 5 millimeters. They either come from clothing fiber or they are the result
of larger plastics breaking down. Particles floating throughout the ocean.
Even in the guts of the ocean, tiniest creature like plankton. But the sediment study showed that some of our plastic is likely hiding buried in the seafloor too. But here are another clue. This is a plastic bag captured to 500
below the surface of the Arctic deep sea. It's
one of over 200
photographs taken
with this sea camera. Part of work that we do is to look at the sea machine in the Arctic. We use the camera surveys to look at the impact on large animals like starfish and snails, sponges. And while I was doing these surveys, I saw that more and more plastic debris was on the sea floor. Melanie Bergman research showed that large plastic objects don't just float
on the surface or degrade into microplastic.
Some of them sink without breaking down.
One study
found that about 15% of plastic in landfills is more dense than seawater, which means the objects will sink on their own. But even though other 50% may actually travel to the sea floor this time, what thing on the ocean surface becomes colonized with water over time, barnacle, mussels, all sorts of different organisms, that it becomes heavier and heavier, and at certain Bergman's research is difficult to replicate through the but it suggests that some of that missing plastic might be sitting on the sea floor, intact. Another clue complicates the mystery, though. This plastic from Taiwan. It's one of the objects excavated during the harvest in the Gap. It was struck researcher and its production date 1971. When they looked at the production dates of other objects, they saw a chance, a lot. It was old chance. This was a new lead, because if the majority of plastic pollution degraded into microplastic or fell to the ocean floor, that you'd see in garbage patches could be new plastic. And that changed the story. The plastic that is accumulated at the surface of the sea is actually very precise. The plastic we find in ocean may actually be for decades or not.
Let's say you usually spend 3 hours per research, but if you use LiDAR, you don't have to spend a lot of time on Google's.
It turns out the new plastic is far closer than the open ocean or the bottom of the sea. Liberton research found that plastic objects on coastlines have more recent production dates than plastic in the open ocean. This clue leads scientists to think a lot of debris actually stays close to, or rather hidden in plain sight. Some of that will end up in the middle of the ocean and garbage patch, but actually a lot of it stays fairly near shore and hauled from beach to beach. Eric Van Sebille is oceanographer and is a missing plastic ends up. The completed model will be finished in 2022.
In the meantime, he and his team published initial results to a Twitter feed.
We use simulations of the ocean currents and their
put in virtual plastic.
We
move that plastic with
the ocean flow. At the same time, the plastic enfrichment, it can degrade. Organisms start growing on, and that weigh down the plastic so that it slowly starts to sink into deeper ocean. So in that way, we are doing like this gigantic simulation of on the ocean, of all the plastic moving around. Van Sebille thinks that a majority of plastic pollution is within 100 miles of shoreline, continually getting washed back on the beaches, down coastline floor. If the plastic continuously goes back and forth between the coastline and a shore, that's a lot of repetition and fragmenting and scrap over the sand. This commotion
of microplastics in sediments and animal guts too.